of our nation. Thanks for taking time out of your very busy schedules to join us. My name is Mark Polito, and I serve as the Congressman's Deputy Chief of Staff at his Long Beach District Office in downtown Long Beach. I will serve as tonight's moderator. Before we get started, I'd like to quickly go over some housekeeping items. At this time, we ask that you silence your cell phones, pagers, and any other electronic devices. I also want to direct your attention to the location of the restrooms, which are in the lobby of the auditorium. The men's is in the auditorium lobby to your left, my right, and the women's is to your right, my left. In the event of emergency, there are various exit points from the auditorium. To kindly complete your registration card and write your question on the back side of the card. Hand your card to one of our staff members or interns. They will sort through the cards and provide them to me to read aloud. The Congressman will then answer as many questions as possible, taking anywhere from 1 to 3 minutes for each question. We will alternate the questions from the audience submitted cards to microphone 1, and then to microphone 2, and then to questions submitted from Facebook Live viewers. And tonight will be broadcast live on Facebook from the orchestra pit. And if there are any questions, if we reach capacity, we have an overflow room. We'll take questions from the folks who are over there, which is not too far in the high school cafeteria. In the interest of time and to cover as many questions as possible, we ask that you be concise when asking your question and be aware that follow-up questions will not be allowed. If you would like to follow up on an issue, please mention that on your registration card and staff will contact you accordingly. One final request, when you come to the microphone, please be sure to clearly state your name and city of residence. Thank you. At this time, I would like to acknowledge the presence of some dignitaries who are with us today, as well as their representatives. Tonight we have Long Beach Unified School District Board President Megan Kerr. Long Beach City Councilwoman Stacy Mungo from the 5th District. Long Beach Council Member Roberto Uranga from the 7th District. The Chief of Staff to Council Member Mungo, Mr. Steve Napolitano. Councilwoman Lena Gonzalez from the 1st District. And her Chief of Staff, Mr. Corey Allen. Representing Vice Mayor Dee Andrews, Connor Locke. Representing Mayor Robert Garcia, Field Representative Abigail Mejia. Representing California State Senator Ricardo Lara, Field Representative Tonya Martin. And the District Director for State Senator Ricardo Lara, Julia Juarez. District Director to California State Assembly Member Patrick O'Donnell, Ms. Marisol Barajas. Field Representative to Congresswoman Nanette Barragan, Tess Harmon. Chief of Staff to Councilmember Al Austin II, Mr. Jonathan Krause. And you may have seen him on the way in. He has a table with some information outside. Mr. Albert Johnson, representing the United States Department of Labor, Employee Benefits Security Administration. Let's give a round of applause for all of our dignitaries and the representatives who have joined us this evening. Thank you. Now, I know that a number of you may have turned in your card already, but if you did not have a chance to write a question and you prefer submit your question instead of coming up and addressing us from the mic. Feel free to raise your hand and we'll have some staff come down and give you another card. Okay. Staff, interns in the back, if we could come with some blank cards and pens. So keep your hands raised. See some over here down in front. A lot of the early birds probably filled out the front side and we didn't let you know about the back side. Okay, we are right on schedule. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, at this time, to provide welcome remarks and introduce the Congressman, it is an honor to introduce to you the President of the Board of Education of the Long Beach Unified School District, Megan Kerr. Board President Kerr has served since 2014, representing District 1 on the board. She is a lifetime Long Beach resident and parent with over 12 years of service to Long Beach schools. Before being elected to the Board of Education, she was a volunteer and PTA member in Long Beach Unified, having worked in classrooms, offices, music and sports programs, and green teams in several Long Beach Unified schools. She was a member of the Long Beach Council PTA, as well as part of the North Long Beach Initiative and Strategic Plan work groups. Megan maintains a strong presence in the community and collaborates to improve the lives of the students, families, and communities in Long Beach, with a focus on the areas of college readiness, after-school programs, job training, and mentoring. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to the Honorable Long Beach Unified School Board President, Megan Kerr.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Congressman. Thank you so much for having me. Welcome to Milliken High School. So on behalf of my board colleagues and our superintendent, Chris Steinhauser, it is a delight to welcome you and to welcome you, Congressman, to one of our Long Beach Comprehensive High Schools. I apologize for the warmth. As many of you know, Measure E was passed a few years ago by our Long Beach taxpayers to help support infrastructure improvements, including air conditioning and accessibility issues at all of our schools, which is well underway. Some of you who live in the community may be seeing construction happening at schools or some more school buses in the neighborhoods as kids are moved from one school to the other. So we appreciate your support in those efforts, as well as your patience with the work that we're doing. It was an honor to be asked to do this introduction, actually. One of the things we're most proud of here in Long Beach and Long Beach Unified is our Long Beach College Promise, which, as you know, has become a model program not only for the state of California, but for the nation as well. And the Long Beach College Promise grew out of a seamless education initiative started in the mid-90s under Mayor Beverly O'Neill and the current superintendent, Carl Cohn. And it was, how do we support our students to do better across the continuum of our education systems? And so from those conversations, the Long Beach College Promise was born. And as a state senator, Congressman Lowenthal authored the bill, which allowed Long Beach City College and Cal State Long Beach to change the rules and to bend the rules and to give the students from Long Beach Unified preferential access to those programs, allowing our students here in Long Beach to be educated by our hometown institutions. And so this year we celebrate 10 years officially of the Long Beach College Promise. There's a great website that would give you the details, but I just want to give you a few statistics about some of the work and the fruition of that. So Long Beach Unified is the third largest school district in the state of California, if you didn't know that. After Los Angeles and San Diego, we have 74,000 students, 70% of whom qualify for free or reduced lunch assistance. So 10 years later, almost half of our graduates from Long Beach Unified School District attend Long Beach City College or Cal State Long Beach. Of our students that are going immediately to college after graduating, 70% are choosing Long Beach City and Cal State Long Beach. Our graduation rate has improved again to 86% overall, 3% above the state average, and I believe 5% over LA County's average. Our A through G rate, which is students qualifying for four-year universities, has improved 11% in the last 2 years to 56%. And 56% of our 2018 graduates met the minimum CSU index score, up 18% from 4 years ago. So that work is done not just by Long Beach Unified, but by the innovative work at Long Beach City College and Cal State Long Beach. And when we talk to students about the college promise, the thing we tell them as young as 4th grade is there is a seat waiting for them at Long Beach State if that's what they choose to do. If their course in life is to attend a university, we will hold a spot for them if they meet the minimum requirements. So of the 102,000 people across this country who applied to go to Long Beach State, our graduates get priority admission over anyone else. And that is a commitment made by Jane Connolly at the college that makes a huge difference in the lives of our Long Beach students. We know that about 70% of our teachers in Long Beach State, in Long Beach Unified come out of Long Beach State. So we need to continue to educate our own. And we are grateful for the Congressman's support in all of that work. Yes, absolutely. Great things are happening across the district at every level. We don't just think about college and career. We just opened EduCare, which is a state-of-the-art early childhood program in North Long Beach with the highest possible care of students 0 to 5. It's innovative, it's groundbreaking, and we're proud to have it, and we've had students there for about 2 weeks, so we look forward to the Congressman being able to visit. Arts are alive and well. All of our high schools have robust arts programs, and about 30,000 of our youngsters are playing a musical instrument provided to them by the district. So know that we are trying to educate the whole child. We are about their heads and their hearts, as well as our communities and the families that they come from. Without further ado, it is my honor to introduce Congressman Alan Lowenthal. Congressman Lowenthal is currently serving his 3rd term in the U.S. House of Representatives, representing California's 47th District. Before being elected to Congress, Congressman Lowenthal served 2 terms on the Long Beach City Council, 3 terms as a California Assemblyman, and 2 terms as a California State Senator. He was also a Cal State Long Beach Professor of Community Psychology for nearly 30 years. In Congress, he serves in the House National Resources Committee and the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. He is widely regarded as a leader on environmental, transportation, human rights, and education issues. Representing one of the most ethnically diverse districts in the nation, Congressman Lowenthal has championed human rights in Congress, not just here at home, but throughout the world. He has also brought his strong support for LGBTQ rights to Washington, where he became the first Congress member to permanently fly the pride flag outside of his office. He also serves as the co-chair of the Congressional Cambodia Caucus and as the co-chair of the Congressional Caucus on Vietnam. Please join me in welcoming to the stage our Congressman, Alan Lowenthal.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you everybody for coming. And I look around, thank you my dear friend Roberto Uranga, who we go way back to the days when I was a faculty member at Cal State Long Beach. You know, who I am was really shaped by my experiences at Cal State Long Beach and my frustration that the system wouldn't change fast enough and my activism in the community. And I still have that feeling that things are not changing fast enough. And I believe I still hold on to that activism. And I'll just preface what I'm saying. I'm so glad that you folks are here tonight. I think we're at a critical, I think elected officials always say this, but we're really at a critical junction in our nation's history. The soul of our nation is being tested. We are really looking at different priorities of what government should do. And I'll just tell you, I'm for an inclusionary government, a compassionate government, a government that cares about generations that haven't even been born yet, that wants to protect our resources, wants to make sure everybody has health care, keeps our commitment to people who've worked their entire lives and wants to protect Social Security, wants to make sure that dreamers have access and become part of this country, wants to have rational immigration policies, all things that most of us in this room know we can do, we should be doing, and I will tell you everything, and I'm really going to be here mostly to answer questions and let this be your your town hall meeting. But, you know, we had a town hall meeting about a year ago, and it was maybe a little bit more than a year ago, and people were just kind of worried about the direction of where the country is going. I think that worry has now gone into major anxiety about where the country is going. We've moved beyond just worrying. And I will tell you, you'll be asking me questions and I feel like I want to answer those and be accountable. But everybody in this room is accountable. If you don't vote and you don't tell people that you know and everybody to vote, if you don't understand that half my district is Orange County and if people are not involved in changing the House of Representatives, we are in for this nightmare will continue. So that's really how I put this. Right to do it, talking rid of regulations. They're getting rid of protections. That's what we're doing. They're getting rid of things like making sure that we do not decimate migratory birds, that we don't give up the they want to give up the Endangered Species Act. They want to give up marine mammal protection. That's what they call regulations and don't be fooled by it. Could we always look to make sure that things work better? Obviously. And rule, and we want disregarding a rule of law. That's what we want, and justification, whatever it is, that the one person knows better, and those that in the legislature are just there to follow that person's wishes. That is not why I am elected to Congress, and I hope that's not why you're here tonight. So doesn't mean you have to agree with me when we talk about things. Doesn't mean, but we are here to discuss issues, and there's too little of that being done I'll give you my feeling. It's too little of that being done in the United States Congress. We're not doing that. We're not discussing issues the way we should be. You know, I was elected in 2012, my first time in 2013, with over 80 votes, or close to 80 votes. A comprehensive immigration bill came out of the United States Senate. That was 5 years ago. Never once heard in the House of Representatives. Never once taken up. Denied, done with, that's it. Not only has that happened, we've taken away rights, as the president has this tremendous objection to anything that was done by President Obama. So anything that was done by President Obama, the president wants to take it apart. So the Dreamer is one of the most effective programs that really rewarded those that came to the United States at a young age, contribute to our society, do well in our society, become the leaders of our society. We now begin to treat them as as criminals and use them as hostages for other kinds of issues, and that's what's happened. Lots of great issues are being used as hostage these days for other issues. So we'll talk about that, but we're not dealing with, not me, but the Congress is not dealing with any comprehensive or immigration issues. They're just denying it. And what's interesting was there were a lot of Republicans that really wanted to deal with the Dreamer issue. They were there. They were the only way we could get to deal with it was to sign a discharge petition called Queen of the Hill. Has anybody ever heard of this concept, Queen of the Hill? Normally we just vote on one issue that comes up through some process on the floor of the House. But this time we couldn't get anything, we haven't had any ability to vote on anything regarding immigration, Dreamers, for 5 years. They just will not put up a bill, no matter how many bills we introduce on our side of the aisle. So there were really 3 bills on Dreamers. One was the Dreamer Act, which really was a progressive piece of legislation, supported Dreamers, would have had, I think, all the Democrats, 193 votes, and some number of the Republican votes. Maybe enough. Remember, we need somewhere around 25 votes to pass anything. Then there was another bill that was very similar to the Dreamer Act, but it also included some beginning funding for the wall. That some of the Republicans would have voted for, the Dreamer Act plus some funding for the wall. And we would have probably gone along with it if that money was low. It was not, if we really would have gotten that act put before. So that was the second act. The third act was the Goodlatte Act, which was anti-immigrant, anti-Dreamer, anti-anybody who didn't have Northern European backing, and to eliminate, they call chain migrate. What do they call it? It's family unification. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about what has been a core of our immigration policy, that when people come to the United States and become citizens and become part of the country, we open up our arms to their families. We've always done that. It's only over 100 or 200 years that we've been doing. They want to eliminate all of that and put a negative spin on it, like that's really synonymous with allowing criminals to come into the nation. So that was the Goodlatte bill. That was the 3, and the idea was, since the leadership of the Republicans would not allow us to take up one of the 2 bills that Democrats wanted to take up, we'll put up all 3. We'll do a discharge petition. That means if 218 members will sign it, regardless of what the leadership says, it has to be voted on. All 3 bills, the one bill that gets the most vote passes. We were really confident that either the more progressive one, or the one that at least had some money for border security would have passed. One of those 2 would have been the highest amount of votes. But what happened was we had up to the 20-some-odd Republican votes to sign it. They were all ready to sign it. Leadership said, don't sign it, we'll bring up the bill. They never brought up the bill. They conned these moderate Republicans. So I will tell you, an endangered species are moderate Republicans who want to do the right thing, but they can't bring themselves to doing it. So that's where we are. So that's kind of the climate, except for the president, who I personally, as a psychologist, feel that there is no treatment. There is no treatment. We'll leave it at that. There is absolutely no treatment. I know what it's like to see people who are, I'm not saying he is all this way, but who are psychopathic liars, who have no feeling for other people, who evaluate everything in terms of themselves, and it's all about self-adulation. That's what it's all about. That is not the way to run this country. So with that, and begin to answer any questions that people have. Do we have some questions coming up, Mark?
Okay.
Oh, I also want to say that Councilman Al Austin is here. Where is Al Austin? There he is. Thank you.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we have 15 cards so far, so if you have any does in Orange County receive health care services from Planned Parenthood. These include physicals, cancer and disease screenings, and prenatal care. The question is, how will you defend Planned Parenthood and its patients from the cuts to Title X funding that Trump has threatened? What can we do to preserve Planned Parenthood in our communities?
Well, I have supported Planned Parenthood every single vote and every letter to protect Planned Parenthood. I believe that women's reproductive rights are at risk now with the Supreme Court. Planned Parenthood, which provides services for women who do not normally get services elsewhere. Reproductive services are only one aspect of the services, but the Republican leadership and have been wanting for years, and now this president, to get rid of Planned Parenthood of any support. Vote in 2018. That will save Planned Parenthood. Nothing else besides changing the House of Representatives will save Planned Parenthood. That's it. I can tell you, and I'm on whatever legislation, whatever letters, they're all important, but vote in 2018, and let's make sure that we have a majority of members of the United States House of Representatives support women's rights and women's reproductive rights, and will support health care. It's not just Planned Parenthood. All of health care is at risk. Yes.
Okay, we have our first speaker from microphone number 1. If you could state your name and city of residence.
My name is Paul Klein. I live in Belmont Heights. And I'm very glad that you're my representative instead of Mr. Rohrabacher. Anyway. The long-term challenge is getting people to vote. And the Democratic Party seems to do a horrible job of making that happen.
Making what happen?
Getting people to vote.
Oh, getting people to vote.
It's a crazy serious problem. And even when Trump lost by 4 million votes, and he's still there. There's got to be more voting happening. What, in your opinion, would be the things that need to be done so that we can change this? Because the truth is, as long as people don't vote, they don't count.
Absolutely right. Great question. What are we going to do to get people to vote? Democrats are terrible about getting people to vote. Not exactly true. What it's true is that Democrats, if you look at California, are great at getting, or much better at getting people to vote in presidential elections. The issue is, how do we get people to vote in a midterm election like we're having now? Well, one of the things that you do is to make sure, we got to drag people to the polls. This election is not going to be about persuasion. Of course, we're going to have our message out. I'm going to play in my district, which is half Orange County, half Long Beach, the other half is Long Beach. We're going to talk about what I stand for. But you're right. This election is getting people out to vote, going to their homes, talking to them, and making sure when they get their vote by mail or others that they turn those in, because we will win. Now, across the country, California does a much better job than most states in 2 ways. Number one, we have an independent redistricting commission, and so we lose the House of Representatives because of gerrymandering. That's what happened. We won the vote for House candidates in Ohio. We won the vote in Michigan. We won in Wisconsin, but they have engaged in, especially Wisconsin, dramatic gerrymandering, which is now before the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court kicked it back to the states. So that's one thing. We got to get rid of state legislatures drawing districts just to protect incumbents. That's what we got to get rid of either party. Let the people decide. And I'm proud that when the people decide, they elect progressives people. But let the people decide, not the legislators. So that's one way we're going to fix this, and we have to work on that. And I've been working on that both at the state level, city level, state level, and in Congress. So that's one way to work on that. The other one is voting rights. There is voter suppression going on in this country at a dramatic level. The Supreme Court will not stand up and fight for us when they see dramatic instances of voter suppression. Gonna have to change, we have to make sure that we really live up to the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments of the Constitution, that we protect individuals' right to vote. And we're not doing that now. And so those two things, dragging people now, forgetting about Republican, Democrat, just drag them to the polls. We will win if people vote.
Let's go ahead and go to microphone 2. If you state your name and city of residence.
Hi, my name is Andrew Wenneking. I'm 21 from the Palisades, and I just have a super that's slightly different topic. So as global poverty rates have dropped, the number of potential new consumers in the developing world has increased for U.S. exports, and I'm with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and a number of key American businesses like Apple, Microsoft, etc., have all called on Congress to increase funding for the international affairs budget.
Keep funding, increase funding for what?
Increase funding for the international affairs budget.
International affairs?
Yeah, citing the fact that that's a crucial thing for the developing world to get.
Told that's their priority, that we fund it, and they're given freedom to do that and to do that. Right now, the priority is to look at everybody as our enemy and as our foe and not to fund those things. That is a short-term strategy that the Chamber has identified may get us through this year and next year. Ultimately, in the long term, that is destructive for the nation to move in that direction, Okay, so we got, again, we have to put money into it. When the president first came in, he had a dramatic cutting of the State Department. They haven't filled a lot of those positions. There is no movement towards having really working on diplomacy issues. We're seeing it throughout the world. And we're not any longer, when you leave, part of U.S. policy under whether it was Obama, whether it was Bush, whether it was Reagan, was that we were the beacon of freedom. We were the place where everybody looked to for hope and for understanding. We are not looked that way anymore. People see us as frightening, and they don't understand what's going on here in the United States. Yes.
Oh, actually, before we go to the next audience card, let me check if we have any questions from Facebook Live. Do we have any questions yet? Okay, so we're going to go to this next card, and then we'll go to microphone 1 after that. Thank you, ma'am. First, quick comment. It says, I find the Trump immigrant policies disgusting. I'm also worried about Medicare and Social Security. Please don't let Republicans privatize Medicare and Social Security. Thanks. That is from Gwen from Long Beach, 90808. And her question is, when is the government going to reunite immigrant families? When can we impeach Trump after the blue wave election in November?
I think there's a theme there, but it's more than one question, that theme. Again, nothing about congressional action that's needed to either respond to the Mueller investigation when that comes out, or feelings in Congress that the president has variety of reasons that reached the level of impeachment. Nothing is going to happen until November. Impeachment is a political process. You got to get 218 votes. I would say now the maximum we're going to get is 193. We're going to have one shot at it. Let's do it right when we get that one shot.
Okay. Microphone 1, name and city of residence.
Hello, my name is Sasha Ramirez, and actually I'm a student here at Cal State Long Beach. I currently reside here in Long Beach, and my question to you is regarding the over 2,000 children that are currently held at the border, the Mexican-U.S. border, and what would your recommendations be for the current administration to begin to reunite these families?
Well, the question, as everybody heard, is what about the 2,000 children? About a month ago, I don't remember exactly now how long it is, I was part of a congressional delegation that flew to Texas, spent time at both McCallum, which is the center where one's, where they bring people in and end up assessing and coming up with kind of whatever plan that they were going to have, which, and then I also visited later on a detention center, which is really another word for a jail. It had been a jail before, where mothers were in jail. Well, the first thing is that I was appalled. I was absolutely in shock when I went to McCallum, to the center where people were first brought, where children were in cages, like dog-run cages. There were maybe 100 of them. Parents were sitting separated from their kids. It was the first time, crying. And I began to talk to people, and then when I went on also to the, quotes, prison where they kept the mothers, I was struck. This could be my parents. This could be, we're talking about people leaving a horrible situation, seeking asylum. We have always been the beacon for people who are seeking asylum. We treat people who are seeking asylum with respect and compassion. Maybe not everybody will ultimately reach the criteria for receiving asylum, which I think is much too restrictive, but I think we need to work on it. But I think what is appalling by this administration was the treatment of people not with respect, but with disgust and separation, with no plan. We went and I spent some time with some mothers, and maybe I'm kind of overreacting, but I know as a psychologist working in mental health issues that we all need to cry at times, and we all cry, and sometimes we sob, and occasionally we cry from our core because we have lost something so deeply that there are no words. You just need to hold that person. And I was with mothers who cried from their core because they didn't know what was happening. That cannot happen in the United States, and I will never support it.
Sir, microphone number 2, name and city of residence.
Hi, my name is Nigel Lifsey. I'm here in Long Beach, California. If I could just talk about Social Security for a sec. Social Security. So I'm 34 years old. I've been paying into Social Security about 12 years now. And the Social Security trustees, they come out with their report every so often. I think they said the money's gonna run out in 2034, which is pretty soon. I mean, I think maybe some folks in this room are already receiving their benefit checks and may not get them in 2034. What are you and your colleagues doing to address that?
Or Medicaid. So the question about Social Security, you have to step back and you're asking, what are we going to do about it? Well, let me tell you what we have done about it recently, which is absolutely abhorrent. Every 20 or 30 years, we usually go through some period of tax reform. Tax reform for the nation is a good thing to go through because it gives us, under normal circumstances, a chance to re-examine who's paying the taxes, what does the nation need, what are our needs, and so forth. This year, we went through a tax reform process that was just the opposite. It was closed, it was done behind hidden doors, and all the benefits went to the wealthy. The top 83% went to the top 1% or that. Not saying that we shouldn't have had some kind of balance, corporate taxes may have been so high, but the middle class and working people got nothing. More than they got nothing, we have now generated an additional $1 trillion in deficit, and they just put out their new budget going forward for 2019, which includes a cut to Medicare and Social Security. So that's what this is all about. We continue these policies of just rewarding the rich. Nothing wrong with everybody getting a share of the pie, but you can't give them the whole pie. That's what this is all about. We gave them the whole shooting match and asked everybody else to pay for it, and you will pay for it if you are. And remember, Social Security is a commitment. It is a commitment. It's what binds us and keeps us together as a nation. It says that you work and you put in your time, this nation is going to provide you with a pension, and it came out of a time when people did not have pensions and had nothing. So it's to the core of the social change, and I tell you, if they start to take away, and instead of sitting down with us and figuring out how we can deal with some of the trust fund in Social Security, there are a lot of ways we can fix Social Security. We have a lid now at $118,000, so if you're making more than that, you don't pay anything into the system. Well, that has to end. People who are earning money have a commitment to help the society. I'm a Jew. I do that because of growing up tikkun olam. I want to help. That's why I do this in government. They are now at a point in this country where we're passing policies that are solely based upon greediness. That has to end too. And so, yeah, you know, we should have looked at overall tax reform, but it should not have been at the expense of the middle class. And we have a housing crisis because they're taking away tax credits for affordable housing. This is outrageous what they're doing, and we won't see that for the next few years until it comes down, because the people in this room are paying for it.
Congressman, that's a good segue to this question. Our first question from Facebook Live, from Jordan in North Long Beach. The question is, shouldn't we be investing to expand permanent supportive housing nationwide?
Absolutely. Our tax purposes, that's why I started, should be something to reflect our values. We should be incentivizing. We should be incentivizing, you know, if we want people to live with dignity, and we know it's much cheaper than having them ultimately end up on the streets or incarcerated, or we closed down the state hospitals because it was so expensive. But we didn't replace it with anything. And so that's really the issue. Yes, we need supportive housing. In the long run, I remember, I'll give you an example. When I was on the city council a million years ago, 20 years ago, and I started and went to the state assembly, and I had many of the citizens on, and that's when every truck that was dirty used to go in and out of the ports in those days. Every ship would use the bunker fuel when it was in port, and everybody said, oh, you can't fix that, it's the economy, stupid, it's all about the economy, you can't protect people. And there were a number of us, and I was glad to be one of the spokespeople for the community that said, wait a second, we can have economic development and sustainable and environmental protection, and people who live in environmental justice issues, if you live near a freeway, you should not have your kids having asthma. That's it. And we have to change those policies, and they did, And they changed those policies, and now the ports are doing very well, and they're moving towards sustainability. They're not there yet, but they're moving towards it, and it hasn't hurt their business. So when you hear people say, as if we move towards an environmentally sustainable, form of energy, and that it will hurt the economy, it is just the opposite. It is the only hope for the long term of this economy.
Let's go ahead with microphone number 1. Name and city residence.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Simmons, and I live in Long Beach. And my question is there any way that Long Beach can get federal funding to deal with our homeless populations? Our beaches are no longer safe. We have a park in Alamitos Beach that is so drug infested that I can't take my grandkids there. And I'm just hoping that you can help us and get the mayor to do something about this problem, because he's focusing everywhere else, but at the areas that is Long Beach's doorway. It's our gateway.
Yeah, I will commit to working with you and trying to help you on that. I think that's worth. Thank you. I can't quote now what grants are available, what there are, but we'll work with you. If you'll come up after and talk to one of my staff members, we'll just start to work on that.
Okay, microphone number 2. Name and city residence, sir.
And what pressure is Congress putting on the administration? And then just a real quick follow-up, number 2, I would have time to work on multiple campaigns in Orange County if I knew which Republicans are closest to being able to get picked off. So how would I get that information? The local, which offices could help me?
Well, I can't answer which ones. Let me go to the last one, the last part of that, which was, and then you'll have to remind me of the first part. The last part, which campaigns? There are, in Orange County, there are 4 seats that were won by Hillary Clinton in 2016. Congressional seats, the 4 congressional seats. That's I think the 39th, which was Mr. Royce's, the 48th, which was Rohrabacher. I think there's the Issa seat and the Walters seat. Well, Mr. Royce and Mr. Issa, who are saw the writing on the wall and decided they're not running for re-election. So I'll leave that up to you. The incumbents have walked away because they don't want to be involved in this fight. The other one I'll leave up to you. That's Mr. Rohrabacher's seat. I'll just leave that up to you. That seat, I'm not going to speak poorly about anybody. People provide public service, but that seat is right there. And then there's just south of there's the Mimi Walters seat. Well, I know less about the Mimi Walters seat only because she's further down the coast, almost into San Diego County down there, like Isa. So I would think that I border the Royce seat and the Rohrabacher seat. One decided not to run, the other, and I will tell you that part of the county, the western and the northern part of the county, which is the part that I'm involved in, is dramatically changing in terms of its demography and its political outlook. And people are asking for answers in that part of the county. So that's what I would say about that. Now, there was the other part of the question was, do you remember?
Cybersecurity in the election.
About cybersecurity and how safe of our elections. Well, it's an amazing thing, if you've been watching it all, in Congress, the committee chairs are from the majority party. So if you look at the Intelligence Committee, the committee chair is Mr. Nunes, and who carries out the White House and up until recently has denied even the existence of any Cybersecurity could have been with anybody and any time. And on our side of the aisle, the ranking member is Mr. Schiff. And we've been trying to get information and to fight for resources to put into cybersecurity. We just had a bill that we voted on that with no increases really for cybersecurity. Yes, we are really worried about cybersecurity. I think California is very very sensitive to the issues. I think there are some states where they're much more behind than even us here in California, and so I worry about that. Maybe a little less here in California than I do in some other states where we have really very little protection. This is a very serious threat. You know, it's not a threat. We have been attacked. This is a vital internal attack upon democracy. And right now, nobody is accountable for us being attacked. And they're going to continue to attack. It's very concerning, and we're going to try to put more resources into it. I think now even the president, because of that disastrous performance at Helsinki, which was absolutely disastrous in two ways. Number one, he sold out our institutions, which he's been selling out anyway all along, and denying that there was an attack upon the United States government by the Russians. And I think now is because of the tremendous backlash from people, he has now changed that position. But it's getting close. We need to put more resources into it.
Okay, we have our second question from Facebook Live. This is from Leslie from Long Beach 90803. Congressman, how will you encourage bipartisan legislation by the House in Congress?
The question is, how can well, I try to spend a lot of time, I'm pretty clear where I am on the issues that we've talked about, but I think there are issues about good government, human rights, very hard on the environment, but even there, to build coalitions. So let's take the environment, which is very, very hard. When I was elected to Congress, the Congress member who had set up our kind of climate change caucus. And what a caucus is, people have similar interests, want to come together and identify with an issue, and they want to work together and see what they can do as a group to put forth or to move forth some issue. And Mr. Waxman had set up the Climate Change Caucus, which was the Safe Climate Caucus. And when he left in 2014, he asked me if I would take over to be the chair of the Safe Climate Caucus. And between 2014, and there were 45 Democrats who saw climate issues as one of the core issues that they wanted to work on. So I spent between 2014 and 2016, because every member of the caucus was a Democrat, trying to visit and meet with Republicans to get them to join the caucus, or asking what they'd want, offering to make them the co-chair. How can we work? The environmental issues should not be Democratic issues. Historically, the environment was a bipartisan issue. It was not just Democrats that did. And I couldn't get one Republican because they feared their own leadership if they did it, even though. So a couple of them said, well, let's start a new group called the Solutions Caucus, which will have an even number of Republicans and Democrats, and you can be one of the founders of that, one of the new group, which I was, and that has grown to now over 40 Democrats and 40 Republicans. That's the good news. The bad news is we can't get, besides maybe 4 or 5 of those 40 Republicans, to support any climate change legislation. So it's very tough. They want to support it, but they're scared of supporting it. And so I am now convinced that we need to create a climate where we work together, where we try to create, because a lot of these issues do not have to be partisan issues. Social Security was never a partisan issue. Healthcare should not be a partisan issue. Immigration should not be a partisan issue. It should be setting priorities for the nation. But they don't want to do that now. With this president, they're scared of stepping out in front of this president. So I think the best way we can deal with that is to win back in 2018 and then start that negotiations. Because I will tell you, the endangered species in all of this are the Republican moderates. They're the ones that potentially will lose even more seats in 2018. They're the only ones that really wanted to work with us, but were too frightened to step up on immigration and do it. They could have done it with the Dreamers. They could have put up 25 to 30 votes and we could have passed something, and they would have been heroes. But they got scared because their leadership said no. They closed down, and they're the ones that are going to be endangered in the future, because it's not so much in this country. Sometimes, people will be okay if you stand for something and they disagree. It's when you walk away from things, when you don't stand up, when people see you without a spine, without a backbone, and that's what people are watching that's going on now in the Congress.
Let's take our next question from microphone number 1, sir.
Hello, my name is Charles Rashal. I live in Long Beach. Quick question for the gentleman on the microphone 2 sort of took my question. I'm retired, and I think there's probably a lot of people in this room that have time before the election. What specifically, more than just voting, for people that are really distressed where this country is going with this administration, what specifically do you think we could do? Work on particular campaigns of...
Right. Not just vote. Work on campaigns right now. Contact, if you have family, contact our senators about the Supreme Court nomination. Will speak, and that's what we have to do. And so that it's not just voting, it's making sure you spend time or you get your family, because that's going to change what we do on education. It's going to change on what we do towards health care. It's going to do whether we want a sustainable environment. We're moving in the other direction. So it's about time, and it's tough enough this is a big ship to change its direction. It's going to be tough enough. But I think that is, I cannot say it enough. Impeachment is up to the people of the United States right now.
Next question, microphone number 2.
Hello, Carol McKelvey, Long Beach. I'd like to follow up on the Congressman's opening comments about immigration.
On what? On
Immigration.
Yes.
And that the United States was discriminating based on race.
Huh?
That the United States was discriminating against immigrants based on race.
Yes.
I was unaware that the United States had any race-based laws, and I was wondering if you could say which laws that you're referring to that give preference to Northern Europeans or discriminate.
The president and I think, I don't know if it was Sessions or others, in their statements in terms of changing the immigration laws to, rather than family and reunification, but really on people should only be coming to the United States if they engage in certain kinds of skills. And so we are going to discriminate against anybody else. The vast majority of us came from families that had none of those skills. They were fleeing oppression and coming to this country, or fleeing. So that's one thing. The second thing is, we have seen with the president's Muslim bans that have gone through a number of iterations. The courts have said those were discriminatory. The administration kept saying, no, we're just doing it in terms of natural security. For the first number of iterations, and even the last one, which is were based upon ethnicity and racial characteristics, not from the country. It's been modified a little bit to kind of meet that, but that's an example of discriminatory immigration policies.
Okay, the next question is from an audience card from Sherry of Westminster. Congressman, As a teacher, the most different days of my school year are lockdown drills. What are you going to do to make our kids safe at school? What are you going to do to end the power of the NRA and stop them from using scare tactics as propaganda to stop gun laws to stop guns from getting into wrong hands?
Well, let me preface my remarks by saying, and then I'll kind of give what I think we need to do, by saying, there are a lot of people out there that run, are really proud of, they have an A grading from, the NRA grades you. Well, since I've been on the city council and helped to work on gun safety issues here in Long Beach, to the state legislature, and now to the Congress, I've now been in office too many years, 25 years or so. I've had an F rating for 25 years. So that's where I'm coming from. I wrote legislation. I worked on just getting people together to take on the NRA. We did it by banning Saturday night specials when they were the guns that were sold around here. There was a ring of 6 manufacturers that would sell these starter guns to young kids, and that's where you could get a gun for $25 or less. You never could tell whether it was going to kill you or the person you were shooting at. That's how bad these guns were. We finally stopped them by setting standards because of the Second Amendment. You couldn't just ban it, so we set standards for the sale of them, which drove all these businesses that were just making cheap guns for kids out of business. There are basically, and this is what's so bad, because even if you talk to NRA members, there are some things we all share in common. I'm going to go much further than where the NRA wants to go, but even the NRA members understand, most of them, that number one, you don't need to have all these loopholes for background checks. They know that. It's the gun manufacturers that don't want to do it. They do not want to be held accountable. We passed legislation that needs to change, and we would change gun safety laws in this country if manufacturers of weapons were held accountable and liable in the courts. But they're not. We gave them immunity a long time ago. So there are a lot of things that can be done. But we need to do at a minimum background checks. We need to make sure the bump stocks. We need to not be selling assault weapons. We need to do, and those are just the basic things that we need to do. But we're a culture that rewards being tough, and and states that have, what is that? Stand your ground states versus mental health and compassionate and reaching out and providing services for people at need. We don't do that. We let them take it into, we don't deal with it with angry people very, very well in our society. We don't support and we don't provide for the mental health service. Schools, teachers, that their counselors have hundreds of kids that they have to make sure that they're assessing. They're not really there to become their friend or to understand what's going on. We have our priorities backwards in this country if we want to fix the problems. We've got to focus on helping people. Helping people.
Let's go to our next question. Microphone number 1, sir. Name and city of residence, please.
Hello, my name is David de la Tierra, and I'm from Long Beach. So earlier you spoke on your concern for the coming future generations.
I can't hear you. Huntington Beach, yeah?
Long Beach. And earlier you spoke on your concerns for the future generations.
Yes.
And as someone who is a part of that future generation and someone who works with kids, and specifically kids on the west side, mostly kids of color near the oil refineries, my question is, the 200 million barrels of oil they want to drill from the Los Cerritos wetlands?
Well, I can tell. What are we going to do for the 200 million barrels of oil that?
What are you going to do to protect the kids from that?
You mean future? Kids from living in a carbon intensive environment. Well, the first thing that we have to do as a nation immediately is pass a carbon tax or something like that. And really, in everything we do, assess the social cost of carbon and what is going to happen. The problem is we're not paying for it now. What you're saying is we're taking it out of the ground now for the benefit of the people now, but in the future, there are going to be a lot of kids that are going to pay a heavy price for that. Well, that has to be figured in the cost of carbon when people are making money, and we have to use that money to really invest and provide incentives in alternative energy. I will tell you, we don't do that. Right now, we give the oil companies and the tremendous incentives to engage in exploration that we lower. We do not give those same kinds of tax breaks and incentives to alternative energy. That has to change. If we change that, we will see, we're already beginning to see a decrease in fossil fuel, but if we can incentivize alternative energy, renewable energy, and not incentivize oil and gas, and they had to really compete as the first step. And then we need a plan like California. The nation needs a plan. We need to know when we're going to move towards zero emissions and when we're going to have that down, and we need to give, those industries that are based upon carbon either a particular time that they can move towards alternative kinds of energies. We're seeing that happen, but there is no plan. We don't have a plan at the federal level. We can't even discuss it at the federal level. There is no discussion. We just passed new interior appropriations where the departments are not allowed to deal with issues of climate change. We're going to lose our beaches. We're gonna because of carbon change. California's on fire because of the heat. What do you think is happening? And we're not addressing it by having even the kinds of legislation. Before I tell you we should do A, B, and C, we need a national discussion of this. We need to set priorities, and instead of Mr. Trump getting rid of the CAFE standards, fuel emission standards, getting rid of our waivers for the Clean Air Act, getting rid of all the things that we're doing to limit, and it's not even enough. But here, they want to get rid of it all. That's what's that's what he's proposing. Get rid of all of this. And drill in the Pacific. That's what he's proposing. And drill in the Arctic. Drill at the Arctic National Refuge. We have to change our priorities. And that can only happen when you elect people that have a real commitment to changing our priorities. And that's not happening in this Congress.
Our next question from microphone number 2, sir. Name and city.
Good evening, sir. My name is Eric Four. I was born, raised, and reside in Long Beach. What options will future administrations have in terms of repairing or replacing the Iran nuclear deal?
I am totally befuddled by the thinking of President Trump. I mean, I just completely escapes me. It completely escapes me. As you know, there were the Iran nuclear non-proliferation deal, the JCPOA, which was agreed upon by every country basically in the world. Everybody signed on. I think maybe one small or two small may not have agreed, but everybody, Syria didn't agree. It was in the middle of a civil war, but everybody agreed to it. And it stopped in its tracks a country that was about to have a nuclear weapon within 6 months. We knew that. Was it the final answer for everything? No. But it gave us 10 to 15 years. We had lifetime observation. We have never had the ability in any kind of agreement before to go in and investigate and to have people on the ground. We knew where every centrifuge it was in that country, every single one we removed. We had access, not like in North Korea, we had access to everything in that deal. So, did it deal with ballistic missiles? No, it wasn't supposed to deal with ballistic missiles. It was supposed to deal with nuclear weapons. That's what a nuclear non-proliferation treaty does. And it worked. And now the great negotiator says he wants everything. He wants to get it. We're going it alone. This is the America Alone Party. And that is the wrong way to go. We are shocking our friends. Does it mean that we shouldn't be always thinking about how we can improve it and work in the future? But not by pulling out and being the bully, where everybody works so hard on this together. And we did get 10 to 15 years, at least at a minimum, of relief. So I don't know what he wants. I literally does not know what he wants or what he's going to replace it with. Or it's just like their attempts. They kept saying they hate the Affordable Care Act. They hate it. They hate it. They hate it. They're going to get rid of it. They're now suing to get rid of pre-existing conditions. They got rid of the mandate. They don't want to provide the subsidies. So you ask them, what do you want? What are you proposing? Just tell us what you're proposing. And it's absence. It's kind of like a social Darwinian theory. They want people to be on their own. And if you can afford it, you can get it. And if you can't, we'll give you the cheap insurance that doesn't cover anything. That's what they want. It's not my America.
Our next question is from Facebook Live. Philip from Long Beach, 90813. Congressman, can you share what bipartisan legislation you're working on or have worked on to help bridge the divide?
And do what? They divide?
Yes. What bipartisan legislation you are working on or have worked on to help bridge the divide?
Well, I'll take three things that I'm working on. One, I worked a long time on government reform when I was in the city council, and it was a nonpartisan issue when we worked on public, not so much, but campaign finance reform here in Long Beach, and it was the model program, and it's since been watered down a little bit, and they didn't like having real limits on campaign finance reform, but that was done in a bipartisan way. When I went to the state legislature, I joined what was called a group. I helped to form a group called the Bipartisan Caucus, and my responsibility in the Bipartisan Caucus was to work on the writing of the Independent Redistricting Commission, and I worked on that, and that was a bipartisan effort, and California then picked it up, and the governor picked it up, and it was voted on by the people of California, and we have the model Independent Redistricting Commission. In the Congress, which I have been working with a number of Republicans who also understand the horrors of gerrymandering. They understand it. They've gone through it themselves, and so that's a really bipartisan effort. I think is my work. I worked on what was called the amicus briefs. Those were briefs when the Supreme Court had to decide whether states had the rights to do independent redistricting commission. I got 10 Republicans and 10 Democrats to sign on to a bipartisan brief to say, yes, Congress, that states do have the right to create independent redistricting. So that's the other. The last one is a lot of the work that we do when I was on the Foreign Affairs Committee for 4 years, and I worked a lot on human rights issues, whether it was LGBT issues throughout the world, whether it was on human rights in countries that oppress people and who's part of the diaspora. My district has the largest both Cambodian population and also has in the United States, Cambodian American. We also have in the 47th the largest Vietnamese American community. And so in a bipartisan way with Mr. Royce, who's been the chair, we have worked on human rights issues. And I think that's always, that human rights are not Democratic or Republican issues. They're fundamental values of our nation. So those are always, and you've got to do more of that to build relationships and success. I have a bill to work on infrastructure in this country, as long as it's sustainable infrastructure, reduces our carbon footprint and works on that, but build something. And I have some bipartisan support on that, because I think infrastructure also is a bipartisan issue. Now, do I have on issues such as immigration? No. And other issues? No. But those, I think you have to crawl before you walk. And so I reach out to anybody on any of the issues I'm concerned with, you know, and those are the ones: human rights, redistricting or gerrymandering. Those are critical issues that I think you can have strong bipartisan support. And you build that, then infrastructure, then people are willing to stretch in the future with you. You've got to build some success. And right now, we're separated, we're kept apart. We have a top-down model with a lot of money deciding to the people on the top what's the most appropriate way to do it. We've got to get money out of politics. And so that's what keeps us from doing it, because people are frightened. If they vote the wrong way or get involved with you, their funders are going to walk away from them. And so we have to change all that. But you know, fundamentally, if we work hard enough, you can find those issues where there's agreement. And I think on the other side of is that even when we disagree, we should do it with respect and listen to each other. You know, that's what we should be doing.
Let's take another question from microphone number 1. Name and city, sir.
Hi, my name is Jeff, and I'm from Long Beach, California. My question is going to be what congressional legislative action is possible in response, or what would you be willing to support in response to Mr. Trump's Muslim ban? I have so many Muslim friends who have been deeply affected by this, and if you'll permit me, I'd like to contextualize my question by sharing the story of just one of them.
Absolutely.
So this is one of my friends from Iran, and I'll show her picture to the audience, but I have to ask you not to photograph or film it because it would put her family and her life in danger. So this is one of my friends from Iran. In 2009, well, like many Iranians, she is Muslim, but she is also very secular, and she wants to see greater democracy for Iran. She does not want U.S. intervention in the country. She wants domestic change to occur naturally. And so in 2009, when the Iranian regime stole the election, she was one of the top leaders of the Green Movement, the pro-democracy Green Movement protests in the country. For this, she was, many of her friends were killed, others were disappeared. She was arrested by the Iranian secret police. She was imprisoned in a secret basement prison where she was subjected to torture for 2 years. In order to get out of the prison, she had to sign since everything she had done was legal under Iran's civil laws, the only way they could charge her with a crime was charging her as being Mortad, the one who fights against God. In order to get out of the prison, she was required to sign a document agreeing that she was Mortad and would be subject to execution if she engaged in any further democracy protests. Once she was released, she of course went right back to engaging in democracy protests because she's very stubborn. One of the members of her cell was captured, and so she had to flee the country. She was fortunately able to eventually gain asylum and come here to the United States. And she wanted to find a way to pay the United States back for what it had done for her and for its stance for democracy. So she joined the US Army. Of course, there's a problem with her being in the Army, and that's because she has a small 2-year-old child. She has a small 3-year-old daughter. And because she had to flee here and had no family to accompany her, she has no one to look after her 3-year-old, and her spouse, for reasons that we don't need to get into, is not a suitable parent. She's having to raise the child alone. So she can't deploy with the units that she wants to deploy with because her mother, her father, none of her family members who could take care of her child are eligible to come to the country anymore because of the Muslim ban. In addition, what she really wants to do for the military is join the counterintelligence operations of our armed forces. She wants to use her knowledge of Farsi to serve the counterintelligence mission of the US military. However, in order to pass the security qualification requirements for this military occupational specialist of counterintelligence, you're not allowed to have any direct family members living in a foreign country, because if you do, obviously your family members can be threatened and that can create a compromised situation. So not only is she not able to deploy in the unit she wants to deploy in, but she's not able to pursue the military specialty occupation, and our country is deprived of her skill set to fulfill the national security mission of our armed forces because she can't get her family out of Iran. So with that, I have so many stories I could share, but just with that one story, what action, if any, would you be willing to take to respond to Mr. Trump's Muslim ban?
Well, I've taken on all the Muslim bans, signed letters opposing every Muslim ban, supporting the work of the attorney generals from the state of Javier Becerra in California, Washington, Hawaii. Those attacks, I think the only chance to deal with the Muslim bans and what we have is now in the courts. That's really where it's in litigation, and I have supported all the litigation that does. It is, we're not even dealing with the dreamers. So Congress is not going to take up anything, even in the horrors of when the Trump administration talked about the Muslim ban. And a lot of Democrats said this is totally we all said this is discriminatory. This is, an attack upon a religion. This has nothing to do with a personal belief in democracy or not. This is just a way to cleanse the nation of a particular religious belief. And we spoke out against it. We could not get Republicans to want to raise that issue against the president at this time. So I think it's all, right now until the election, it will be done in the courts. Again, I think that's an issue that will be raised by the Congress if the nature of the Congress changes in 2018.
Okay, microphone number 2.
Good evening, Mr. Lowenthal. My name is Nia Hartman. I'm from Rossmore. I think you're absolutely right that voting this November is going to be the key to fixing as many of these problems as we can. My concern is that I believe there are about 5 red states that still do not have paper trails on their election machines. Some of those are still Diebold machines, and we know the history of that company. And anyway, right. Is there, seeing that elections are run by states, is there any way for the federal
Wes from Long Beach 90815. The first comment is we need an honest debate about defense and military overreach. Congressman, the question is, what is your position on defense spending and needs versus threats?
Well, on one hand, I believe that we need a strong military to be the defenders, really, of hopefully of freedom and attack throughout the world. On the other hand, I agree with you that our defense spending is out of control, and we're spending far too much. I'm one of the few Congress members that in my 6 years have never voted for a defense appropriation bill, never voted to fund the Defense Department. Not because I'm anti-defense, but because that money gets taken away from social programs, that money gets taken away from representing the people. People do not even know what's in it. We're now engaged in a kind of a rehabilitation of our nuclear weapons. We have the largest amount of nuclear weapons on this planet, and we're spending a tremendous amount of money to increase those, the capability of those, because we see the Russians and the Chinese are doing it. And so these arms races, even though we have much, much more than they have. The Pentagon gives us in the beginning of the appropriations process what they need, kind of goes through the budget that and then we in Congress end up giving more money than was even asked for people's projects. We have what is called the OCO account. It really burns me. The OCO account is has anybody ever heard of that? That's the Overseas Contingency Operation. That means you all know about the OCO account was during the Bush administration when we went into Iraq. We did not, that money to pay for that Iraq war was not paid for out of the budget. It was paid for on a fund which was called the Overseas Contingency Operation, which is just to be used for that. When there's a major event out there, you know, and we don't have a plan for it, there'll be some funding. Well, we've been filling up that overseas contingency with all the things that some of the large Boeing and others want to buy, you know, for planes and other things, and we add to it all the time more than the Pentagon wants. And so rather than being used as a way of dealing with a specific operation that's a crisis, it's a slush fund. I'm not voting for that stuff anymore, even though I'm not saying I want to have a weakened America, but this is outrageous. We have to have a real oversight. We have to really do audits of the and find out what do we really need and why are we on this runaway thing just to fund the Defense Department.
Go back to microphone number 1.
Good evening, Congressman Lowenthal.
Oh, my goodness.
Tina Perazzi, Long Beach.
I know Tina Perazzi.
Thank you for all the work you're doing, representing this district in an environment that is tumultuous at the very least, and probably worse. My question pertains to the Endangered Species Act.
Yes.
I'm concerned because it's been such a successful bill for so many years, for decades really, and changed the lives of species. And this administration seems bent on weakening the Endangered Species Act through deceptive riders, as well as destructive.
Right, they put on all these riders.
Exactly. And what can be done to turn that around or keep that from happening, or to at least keep the Endangered Species Act in place?
During the budget process and the appropriations process, riders are supposed to be, they're additions to the budget process that do not have to do with policy, but really, because policy is supposed to be done through actual legislation, but really riders are supposed to just to appropriate money for things that have already been authorized. But I think what we're seeing is that not only is there an attempt to kind of eliminate many of the environmental protections that we have, they are going as hard as they can to get rid of the Endangered Species Act, as I mentioned before, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, to make sure that we protect the marine mammals. It's worked very effectively. We've reduced the amount of killings of large mammals. They want to get rid of that. They want to weaken the Wilderness Act, get rid of wilderness. We've seen they're getting rid of some of the monuments, national monuments, and wilderness areas by reducing them. So there's a definite philosophy that says we do not need to protect species. We need just to have economic development, and these are seen as regulations that get in the way. They stop development. I think that's a tremendous, the potential for doing harm and damage is unbelievable. We have been able to live with and benefit greatly by protecting species if we get rid of the Endangered Species Act, which is frequently, whenever they want to pass large legislation, get rid of it. And again, I get back to Tina, it's a matter of priorities. Only elect people that do not see this as a negative regulation, but see it as a protection of the environment and for future generations. It is because of the Endangered Species Act that numbers of species have not become extinct. I'll say it again. Without that act, we would have lost large numbers of species in this country. Thank goodness for the Endangered Species Act, but it's only going to happen when there are enough people out there speaking out here, letting us all know that you won't stand for it, and that's what people are doing, and making sure that the people that wherever you all go understand that that is among our highest priority, that this is not just about the selfishness of today. We have an obligation and a responsibility to leave the planet better than what we found it. Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, Congressman, just a time check. We're at 7:30. We have about half an hour left for the event, but we'd like to leave at least 5 minutes for some closing remarks from the Congressman. Let's continue. Microphone number 2.
My name is Dixon from Long Beach. My question is, from your position in Washington, what leads you to believe that getting rid of the current occupant in the White House and replacing him with Michael Pence would actually be an improvement?
I am not into introducing, or if I was supporting an impeachment, articles of impeachment because I like the person or dislike the person or the person always agrees with me. I don't think those are grounds for impeachment. I think the reason for impeachment, if it reaches that, is because the person in the office needs to have articles and a discussion and a hearing, and whether he will, all an impeachment is a charge for high crimes and misdemeanors. That's what we're talking about. And if Mr. Pence, what comes out, is also involved in these high crimes and misdemeanors, if we're ready, then he should be impeached also. That's where we are. But if he's not, we're just into the rule of law and following the Constitution. And that's what we're going to do.
Okay, we have a card here. This is from Lewis from Long Beach, 90803. Congressman, will you endorse Barbara Lee for Speaker now?
I'm thinking about throwing my hat in the ring tonight. What do you mean? No, I think that, first of all, Barbara Lee is not running for Speaker. Barbara Lee has asked to run for caucus chair. And that's when the way it's set up is that there's a majority leader, there's the speaker or the leader. The speaker is if you're in the majority party. Nancy Pelosi is our leader. The minority leader is Mr. Steny Hoyer from Maryland. Our whip is Jim Clyburn from South Carolina. Our caucus chair is Joe Crowley, and our vice caucus chair is Linda Sanchez from around here. Joe Crowley lost the election and will not be representing his district in New York. And so there's going to be a vote as soon as we get back for the caucus chair and potentially the vice caucus chair. I don't believe people have even mentioned who wants to run or not for Speaker or whether Pelosi wants. That's not going to be until after the election and we know what happens. But we will have an election for caucus chair, and I do believe that Barbara Lee does not want to be the Speaker, but if that becomes open later on, but wants to be the caucus chair and is already written to a number. Nobody has kind of taken a position yet, but she's one of the two candidates. The other candidate for caucus chair so far is Linda Sanchez, who is the congressional representative. So those are the only two that have put their hat in the ring.
Okay, let's go back to microphone number 1.
Good evening, Mr. Lowenthal. My name is Daniel. I'm from Long Beach, California, and unfortunately the person before me stole my question. But I was wondering what ideas you have or what legislation can be put forward to counteract the far rightward shift of the Supreme Court in recent years.
What role can the legislature deal with? Oh my goodness! I think that the choice of who is the nomination of the Supreme Court is nominated when there's a vacancy by the president to be approved by the United States Senate. The Senate has some very strange rules. I'm over in the House. I'm not sure I always understand the rules. But part of the reason why the Senate tends to be less impulsive than the House of Representatives is that they tend to have a higher threshold to get things done. And so historically, to get anything, you needed 60 votes in the Senate, although they have subsequently changed that to bring it down to a majority vote of 50. I think it was Mitch McConnell, might have been Harry Reid, but I don't know at the end, or Mitch McConnell, the leaders of the Senate. I don't think we're really going to stop the influence of the far right until we win back the Senate. That's it, you know? You vote yes or no, the president gives the nomination. They're a separate branch of government. We can't pass laws that, you know, that limit their ability to act, because if it's not constitutional, they have a sworn to uphold the Constitution and to look at our laws to say whether they are legal or not. So I don't think we can limit the role of the Supreme Court. I think what we can do is to elect a Democratic United States Senate and pray that Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the others stay alive for the next 5 years. I'm being honest, that's what we have to do.
Microphone number 2. State your name and city of residence, sir.
I am James Sway, and I live in Long Beach, California. I want to keep DACA alive, and as you can see, I'm 10 years old. I'm a kid too, and I support DACA to save all the immigrant children. I think this immigration problem is getting out of hand. Does Trump even care? In fact, $70,000 that are protected under Obama's immigration plan, and 6,030,000 that aren't protected.
Yes, and your question is, first of all, I want to compliment you for being I don't know if you're an immigrant or not, but you're concerned about immigrants and other immigrant children who do not have the same benefits that you have and freedoms that you have, and I applaud you for that, and I'm glad that you're standing up. The more you can educate young people to get interested, to understand that the more they become interested, they will become the next leaders of our country, and that they can have great influence. Your coming here and asking questions will be remembered by everybody in this room. And I applaud you, and I support your concern about immigrants and DACA, and you're right, those numbers indicate that we did have, as I mentioned when I first started, we should have fixed the DACA problem in 2013 when we did comprehensive immigration reform that dealt with that issue, had broad-based support of Republicans and Democrats, but because of the far right, they got to the speaker in the House, and that led to it never coming up for a vote. Now DACA and the Dreamers got caught in that. because the President Trump, who disliked every initiative or executive action that the President Obama did, said that he wanted to fix it, but he hasn't demonstrated at all that he wants to fix it, removed it, the protections, and so we leave a lot of young people at risk. The only thing that's saving them is courts now that saves them. I think that we should be asking there's about 30 Republican members of Congress that want to sign the discharge petition, that should be encouraged to do that. They could go home and they would take on their leadership, but they would be hailed as heroes in their districts if they would do that. Short of that, if we can't get 30 Republicans to pass DACA protection in a bipartisan way, we will have to wait until after the election. That's it, and we will do it, and we will protect young people, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, young man. Congressman, our next question is from D from Long Beach, 90815. His question is, it appears that North Korea is building more nuclear facilities. What can you do to encourage serious diplomacy for all concerned parties?
Well, first of all, that's a great question. I think that we need to work closely with our friends, our allies. We need to see that the United States should not be going it alone, but really should be working in a joint way with the people of South Korea, the people of Japan, the ones that are the most impacted by this, and come up with a regional approach to what we're doing. Because we're the most powerful, we tend to get in front. If that works, that's fine, but what the person is saying is it doesn't seem to be working. There seem to be still some potential development, whether it's in nuclear proliferation or just still maintaining the nuclear weapons. We'll have to see where that goes, but I am a great advocate of regional solutions and working with our partners and not coming up with an America alone solution. That's what I would support.
Okay. We have just a little bit more than 15 minutes left. We'll continue with microphone number 1, 2, we'll go back and forth, and then again, we'll leave 5 more minutes at the end for the congressman to make closing remarks. Microphone 1.
This one, right? Anna Christensen, Long Beach, California. First of all, I want to thank you for having these town meetings. They're a little different than our city council meetings because we ask you questions and you answer them. So we're really appreciative of that so much. And also for your support, especially going down there with the kids and everything. And it's just a crazy time. We just are all totally traumatized, you know. But I wanted to focus on the Los Cerritos wetlands and this project, and it's going to be before the Coastal Commission on Wednesday. And in a conversation with a Coastal Commission staffer, Chief Anthony Morales, Tongva, of one of the oldest bands, the Mission Indian Bands of San Gabriel, called to dig in the wetlands like they're going to be doing to get the 200 million barrels of oil. He simply said, well, you know, we faced this before. We faced it at Cal State Long Beach, you know, a strip mall on the National Register site at Heron Point when all those graves were dug up. He said to us, it's genocide. And we've only got 3% of our wetlands left. We try to talk with people in other areas, rural areas, tribes there that don't lose this much. But for our local Indian people, especially along the coast, they're completely supportive of people making a living, you know, and having places to live. But even the 2,500-foot setback that they're going for in LA won't always help. And so, we're looking at leave it in the ground as a thing both for the health of our community, and we know that there's a movement called Brown's Last Chance, to ask Governor Brown also to try. Long Beach has such a history. I mean, we've already fracked, right? What is your recommendation and what is your response to Chief Anthony Morales, and how do we get rid of our own local addiction? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. I don't know if many of you are aware of the Los Cerritos wetlands, the oil consolidation as part of the project, and the restoration of about 200 acres of wetlands. I've spent a lot, this is not a federal issue, but I've spent a lot of time with Anna, with other people who are both advocates and opposed to the project, just to listen and understand, as an interested citizen, what is really in the city's best interest and what I could do. What I can say now is, it seems to me after reading the what is happening right now is that the Coastal Commission is reviewing the city's land use plan and development and implementation plan for that whole region, the southeast area, the CDIP, the southeast area, development and also implementation plan for the Coastal Commission has to approve the potential to consolidate the oil, and can they do it safely? They have raised a number of issues in where it is, and I'm just responding without publicly now coming out and saying, do I want to stop the project or not? But I think, or support the project, but what I do believe is the Coastal Commission has said a number of things. For this project to move forward, it has to demonstrate that it has policies in place to do a number of things. One is it has to demonstrate that it has policies in place that will minimize any kind of oil spill and will also maximize that there is minimal impact, minimize the impact upon. It also says, God forbid, that there's a major oil spill in this consolidation project, that it would, that there has to be an emergency plan in place. But I think what's even more important is that it said whatever goes forward has to be consistent with the Coastal Act. And the Coastal Act says that coastal resources, whether it's wetlands, whether it's other kinds of marine resources, cultural resources, habitat, Native American historic grounds, all of that as part of the Coastal Act must be developed, and that is not yet in the plan. So I support, before we make a decision, that they really do what they have to do so we can evaluate what the impact of this is going to be. And so right now, I think the Coastal Commission has put a stop and said, wait a second, if you want to go forward, we're not finalized, it has to include certain things that are not there. Protections of the community, protections of habitat, protections of marine resources, protections of wetlands, all of that has to be in a plan before we can make an evaluation. And I agree with that, and so that's kind of where it is now.
Okay, let's go to Mike 2.
Hi. Nada Tushnet from Long Beach. I was really pleased to hear your deep emotional reaction to the separation of families at our border, and I was also pleased that you signed the letter that Representative Schakowsky wrote about the separation of Palestinian kids from their parents.
Yes.
There is a bill that will limit the use of U.S. funds for supporting any Israeli action around those kids. Do you support that bill?
Well, what I support, before you even do that, is immediate U.S. Humanitarian aid to Gaza, and that I support. We have cut off all United Nations relief and welfare money to the people of Gaza. That has been cut off in this administration. I support that being. I also support that Palestinian children are not being treated well by the Israelis, and I supported that letter. The question is, I've met with the author, Betty McCollum, of the bill. We are in discussions about what it would take to support the bill. I have not yet supported the bill. I agree with her overall aims of the bill. She does not plan on moving the bill at all this election until after the election. I think the real issue is not, to me, is what limitations it is on U.S. funding, and that's not that we do not want Palestinian children treated poorly or held incarcerated, not being given their due rights, not having even civil courts, not allowing their parents to be, all being treated by the military. We understand that, and I am pro-Israel, but I am very strongly pro-Israel, and I strongly support a two-state solution. And I'd like this to get worked out in a way that both promotes a two-state solution, protects Palestinian children, and recognizes that they are being treated in many cases unfairly, but also and also respects the integrity of both Israel and hopefully the Palestinian state to live peacefully together. So that's kind of where I am on that.
Ladies and gentlemen, Congressman, we have 10 more minutes left. We're going to take 1 and 2. I apologize to the rest of the people who stayed and were patient in line. We want to give some time.
If you submit your questions, I will try to get back to you and answer them if you put your name on them. You spent this long, so let's go on.
Microphone number 1.
I'm Rob Kaplan from Rossmore.
Oh, hi.
And I'm concerned that there are internal divisions in the Democratic Party that may lead to defeat being snatched from the jaws of victory. The party...
Not going to happen.
Yeah.
We are still the big tent. We encourage diversity.
But, is there a place in the enthusiasm of Democrats to include both socialists and gun owners, for example? And how can we make that work? And how can we make there be energy in all the different parts of the country for all the different big tent
I will
participants?
tell you what has caught the attention, and both of them as good Democrats, both of them are being impressed. You have, on one hand, you have winning in New York, Alexandria, Ocasio-Cortez, who says that she's a democratic socialist. But remember, the critical words are democratic socialist. That's what she says. She represents that wing of the Democratic Party. And at the same time, we just had elected gun owner winning in a district that was Trump plus 17, Connor Lamb. There is room for all. Connor Lamb and Alexandria are both welcome in the Democratic Party, and we will work with them all because that's who we are. They all share the same values of protecting education, peaceful solutions, moving towards making sure we protect Social Security, Medicare. We have a real health care program that protects Americans, that doesn't. They all support those core values. Does Alexandria want to move more immediately towards a more single payer? Probably. Does Connor want to make sure that gun owners at least are protected? Absolutely. They're both good Democrats, and we like them both, and we're really glad that they're both in the party. And that message has to go out.
Hear, hear.
Okay, final question, microphone 2.
Name is Bruce Dovner. My main concern is the possibility of a new Cold War with Russia. I believe that, yes, it was wrong for the Russians to spearfish the DNC, but they did not actually stop anybody physically from voting or physically break in.
I don't think you have to stop somebody physically from voting to really have had a deliberate attempt to influence ours by engaging in tremendous techniques to not only to spy, but to use that information in strategic ways, how that was used, to have phony kinds of social media So I'm not saying
okay.
I'm not saying that it actually did influence, but I think we're going to leave it up to Mueller to see whether, in fact, there was a real attempt to really influence the election, and who was responsible for that. And let's let the facts decide.
Okay, but my question was, I'm not disagreeing that it's wrong. I just think that with this rhetoric that we have today, we don't consider with NATO expansion, Russians' actual security concerns, and with this kind of rhetoric, my question is, do you believe it's better to engage, and as far as human rights in Russia is concerned, do you believe it's better to engage the Russians or to confront the Russians? What I'm afraid of is that the neocon warmongers and Democrats are getting together with this heated rhetoric. We have a Cold War. It could lead to a hot war, and war with Russia would not be like a war in Iraq or Afghanistan or Vietnam. No, a war with Russia could be like World War II. And Hillary wanted to confront the Russians in Syria. That kind of creeped me out too. What will you do in Congress to keep us from getting into a new Cold War with Russia?
Thank you.
Well, I just want the truth. The truth will set us free. That's all I'm saying. Right now, let's let the truth decide what our relationship is at this moment with Russia. I will say this, though, that shortly after I was elected, as a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, I traveled with the bipartisan members of the committee to Ukraine right after the Russians had invaded, the first time since the Second World War that a Western European nation was invaded, or a European nation was invaded by another nation and taken over. So, they have engaged in some horrible behaviors. They have poisoned people on the streets, and their record, human rights record in terms of LGBT community and others, is absolutely abysmal. They are autocratic, and that. Having said that, I always believe that diplomacy is the best. But all we're trying to do now, and I always believe that we should have, diplomatic solutions. But I don't believe that the fawning of President Trump towards President Putin is called for. I believe that President Putin has clearly broken international norms, and while it's important not to potentially isolate the Russians, I think we have to be very cautious how we do it, and to have secret meetings, nobody available, commitments, we have no idea, and then to say publicly, although since saying it was a mistake in the words that he had used, that he trusts the Russian president more than our own intelligence, I think borders on high crimes and misdemeanors. So that's how I feel about it.
Congressman, we have 2 more minutes left if you'd like to make some closing remarks, and thank you.
Well, I think that I really did enjoy, I always get nervous before these. I think, oh my goodness, what are they going to, they're going to ask me specifics of a bill that I've never heard of, something, and you always wonder as a former teacher that, oh my God, I'm going to be up in front and I'm not going to know what the answer. But I really did like our interchange. I really think that it's really important that we have these meetings, that I listen, that we talk back and forth. I think when we're unsure of what is happening and we feel alone and we don't have groups to talk to and raise questions, we feel even more isolated and difficult. And I think at this time it's really important to have this. I still think that we're in a very, as you all know, in a very unsettled moment. We're not sure what our direction will be. I've laid out what I think is a pro-environment, pro-people, pro-healthcare, pro-education, pro-jobs approach, but that's just me and what I believe in. And I wanted to hear what you say, and I've really appreciated your asking these questions, and I hope that I try to answer them, and I hope that you appreciate that I worked and try to answer all your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming. Let's also give a round of applause to all of our students, student interns who helped out tonight, checking you in, and all of the staff.